unlimited tickets. It's a small town.
Here. Okay, tonight I'd like to present on the American Institute of Professional Geologists, the trip that I took to Alaska from September 14th to 24th. And I had 9 days there, and I just tried to pack every day full of adventure. Some of the days were organized and some of them aren't, so here we go. This is flying over Seattle on the way to Alaska. It's an all-day adventure just to get to Alaska. I had to take 3 different flights, one somewhere to like Chicago, one to Seattle, and then one to Fairbanks. Last time I flew into Anchorage, so this time I wanted to go to Fairbanks. This is in the, probably somewhere off British Columbia. I started seeing these things and I figured out it was the Inside Passage. So I mean, just these huge, looks like giant rivers, but that's the ocean, I guess. And then this is when I arrived in the Fairbanks airport. It's not the best picture, but the Fairbanks airport's kind of small. It only has about 3 terminals, and you're greeted with these bears. This is outside, so when I got there, this was September 14th, 2015, but in Fairbanks, Alaska, it was already mid to late fall. I was about 44 degrees and drizzle, and the guy that I met for my car pickup told me that they'd just gotten their first inch of snow. So it was still summer. So then the first adventure I did, so I went to bed, I got a hotel in Anchorage. This is what I could see from my window. Downtown Fairbanks. It's an old mining town. It probably has about 40,000 people, so it's a small town, but it's kind of the major city in interior Alaska. This is Golden Heart Park, because they call it the Golden Heart City. This is got like the Alaska Constitution and various things. This is a these are a little out of order, sorry. So this is a youth hostel, or a hostel that I stayed at later. But the first adventure I went on was a trip up to the Arctic Circle with a place called First Alaska Adventures. And we saw this moose horn arch, and then one of the first major stops was we stopped at the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. So that's about 4 feet in diameter and probably like 1,000 miles long. And just a really amazing feat of engineering. They have inspectors that inspect it like continuously, like by helicopter, and just like that's their full-time job. This is a pig, that plastic thing that they would send through the pipeline periodically to clean it out because it can get gunked up. And that's a major resource for Alaska is the oil. And this is here, you can see it's positioned on these platforms here, and they're on like looks like neoprene or something. I'm not sure what it is, but it's to absorb seismic vibrations, and also they want to keep the pipeline above the permafrost so that you don't cause any subsidence or have any issues. There's mile number 450, so I'm not sure if they're going up or down, but it's kind of somewhere near the middle of the pipeline. And then as we're heading north on our trip, we crossed over some rivers. The first place we went to was about 28 miles north of Fairbanks. It was called the Dome, and it was a hiking place where people like to go to see the northern lights and usually a lot of stars, but of course it was cloudy. So this is what I saw. It's a lot of snow. We kept going north, and you can see the pipeline it just dominates the scene as you go out of Fairbanks on the I think it's a Ciccone Highway or something, and it connects to the Dalton Highway, but they're just near that, so they can service that. Next we got to this little outpost, and this was some like people that came to Alaska in the 1970s. They were kind of pioneer people, and they came in like this old vehicle. And this bus, I think they might have had like 17 kids or something. I mean, there was an interesting bunch of people. They were probably in National Geographic, but they had like a little gift shop. So we went in there, and then we continued north, and you can see here's the arrow. It says Dalton Highway. That's the Haul Road is what it's also known, because it was built originally as a private road to supply the oil and gas industry in Prudhoe Bay. And that was all that was allowed to be on there. And then in the 90s, people were able to get permits, and they started opening it up to the general public so that you could drive on the Dalton Highway. Dead Horse is at the Arctic Ocean, and you're actually not allowed to drive to Dead Horse unless you work for the oil and gas companies or go with a tour guide that's licensed to be up there. You can get about 4 miles from there. So then, here we go. Here's the official Dalton Highway sign. Gateway to the Arctic. This is coming down into the Yukon River, which is about, it might be about 50 miles up the Dalton Highway. They tell you to always have like spare tires or be able to change your tires or everything like that, because if there's no cell phone service once you get like 10 miles north of Fairbanks all the way to the Arctic Circle, and if you get stuck, like, you gotta know how to get yourself out. And I just was like, I don't want to risk that, so I got a guide and paid $225 to go up there and see what I could see. This is the Yukon River, the big river that cuts through the center of Alaska. Touching that, and then as we got even further north, closer to the Arctic Circle, you could see the tundra. We were in the discontinuous permafrost down in Fairbanks, and then it just turned into complete permafrost, and there's just no roots able to develop. These are actually small trees. This here is called Finger Rock, and the guy that I was with, he was an ice road trucker, and he told me that they call it that because when it's 60 below zero in the winter and you're like up there, it's like the finger, like, it's like so cold. So this is the first sign that you see, because this is as far as I went. It's Arctic Circle, and there's 2 signs. There's the green highway sign, and then there's this sign. And then there's this sign. This is the sign you get your picture taken at. Latitude 6633. And they give you a certificate, which is kind of funny. But on the back, you're allowed to graffiti it, and they paint over it. Oh, and this bird. So they gave us sandwiches there, and I have to eat gluten-free, so I needed to get rid of the bread that they gave me and replace it with gluten-free bird. Well, these birds were quick to take the bread. They're Canada jays, and they come down, and like with their little feet, they would take like a whole bun and they'd stash it somewhere, and they'd come down again right into my hand and then take the bread. Just amazing birds, and they must be really hungry. So this is, so what we did on the way back basically is, that was the part that was intended for Northern Lights viewing, but since it was cloudy, we didn't see the Northern Lights, although we did see what looked like a searchlight strobe across the sky. And our guide told us that that was the Northern Lights behind the clouds. They were just so bright that night that you could see the white behind the clouds, and it's a shame that we couldn't see them, but that's the Museum of the North. I'll have a few more pictures on that later. That's a museum at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where they have a lot of Eskimo and Inuit art and artifacts, and just a lot of history and native cultural stuff. This is, I think this will be about the second day. I took this boat ride out of Fairbanks on the Chena River, and it's just a touristy boat, kind of like the Gateway Clipper, but I figured, well, I might as well do what I can when I can. So, kind of went out all the way to, what's that called? There's another river that's a braided river, I can't remember it right now, but it comes through. But you can see the trees are tipping over like that, and that's a process called solifluction. It's when the permafrost freezes and thaws each year, the roots of the trees are situated in the permafrost, and it causes them to tip like that. And you'll see entire sections of just drunken trees that are growing sideways. On this boat ride, we saw some people that do the Iditarod race, and there's a real Iditarod dog team that they had along the river for us to see. And this river is the Tanana River. Now it comes to me. It's this braided river, and sometimes apparently they take the boat out into the Tanana River, but in this case the water was low, so we just got to where we could see it. This is kind of like a cow in Fairbanks, Alaska. These guys are kept as livestock. They're reindeer when they're kept as livestock, and caribou when they're in the wild, and you know, they get milk out of them and meat and everything. And I even had reindeer chili one night at the university dining hall, which was the best place to eat in Fairbanks, I thought. So they have like they have like a little mock-up village that was kind of like cheesy but kind of cute, I guess, too. And so they had a little pioneer or something, and this is a little, like one of these sled dogs, and he's just like a pooped puppy. So then I had to check and see, to show that I was really in Fairbanks. I had to check on my phone here, show that. This lady is just demonstrating the size of the vegetables, they're just enormous because they have 24 hours of sunlight for a good part of the year, so everything grows so fast. And then at the end, there was a gift shop, and it said Alaska at 40 below, and it's a big freezer that's 40 below zero, and I like went in there and they took my picture. But then, so that night there was still some time left, and everyone said, you gotta go to Chino Hot Springs. It's like 50 miles east at the end of this road that goes out of Fairbanks called Chino Hot Springs Road. But on the way I stopped and did a little part of trail that took me up to this nice lake. It was like a 20-minute hike because I wanted to see as much as I could before it got dark. So then Chino Hot Springs is this area. I don't have actual pictures in the hot springs because I didn't want to get my camera wet. Then the next day, this is the actual first official day of the geological conference. We met this fella at the Permafrost Tunnel is what they call it, which is, I guess, one of the only permafrost tunnels in the world, and he's a researcher, and he was telling us about that. And then we went into the Permafrost Tunnel. So this tunnel is permanently frozen, and it smells so bad in there. It smells like cow manure, like really concentrated, and I smelled like that for like hours after I come out. But I didn't expect it to smell like that, but yeah, I guess all the organics, they don't decompose. This is a piece of ice that's just been frozen in the soil for a long time. I mean, some of this stuff's been there for like 30,000 years, they think. I mean, they've done like cores and different tests on this. It's about 160 feet long, I believe, and then there's a little branch that goes off that's not quite as long. This guy here is Felix Pedro. We just stopped by a monument of him. He's a famous Alaska geologist, so we wanted to have lunch there. Then the next place we went to was the Fort Knox Gold Mine, which is the largest gold mine in Alaska, and as you can see, it's a massive operation here. I mean, this is like maybe a mile or more across and maybe a mile deep. So they take these giant trucks here. They're holding 240 tons of the ore, and they haul them into a processing plant. Just for comparison, a typical construction truck is about 30 to 40 tons. Maybe you'll see a 50 or 60 ton. These trucks are so big that the tires have to be deflated and carried under on the highway and then inflated on site because they're too big to even carry down the DOT roads. So this is the processing plant taking some of the ground up ore, which they still use cyanide, leach heap treatments, but I guess it's in an environmentally controlled sort of way. They keep recycling everything. Inside the plant, we were allowed to get some pictures. So this is a huge drum, and it just turns and you know, just breaks up the pieces of ore. And then this picture I like because it was golden, and it's like where they're making gold. And there's the little pieces you can see of the ore just bouncing on the tray there. And then this is a control center for the plant. This is a gold bar. This, I couldn't believe this. I thought to myself, well, I wonder if we'll get to see a real gold bar. So, I mean, in the lower 48, this would never happen, but this girl's like, let me go and check with my boss. She's the geologist that gave us the tour, and we'll see about getting the gold bar out of her. Let me check with security. So she brought it onto the bus and then passed it around, and there I am holding this gold bar. It's worth like $400,000, more money than I've ever made my entire life, probably up to this point. And that weighs about 20 pounds. That little guy there has a specific gravity of about 19. It's the most densest, heaviest thing, like more heavy than lead. It's amazing. So there's a close-up. Then at the end of the tour, we went to the Fairbanks Visitor Center. It's this newly built, you know, really nice visitor center. And then here's just some pictures from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and all the roads there are named like Native American names, and there's a totem pole that they have on campus there. And then at night, just because I had nothing to do that night, I went to this meeting. It was kind of like Native American people talking about Native American issues and like how things have changed, so that was neat. And then there's these coffee places. I've seen these things in Alaska like in the 1990s, but now I think there's a few of them around here, but they're very popular. You drive through and get your coffee, so I did that a few times. Then, so yeah, this would be about the fourth day, I believe. I went on the raft tour with a fishing guide because all the raft guides were shut down for the season. And we did 4 miles on the Tanana River, about halfway between Fairbanks and Chena Hot Springs. And we weren't able to fish or anything. They said that if you are caught fishing without a license, like the guide can be fined $20,000 or something. I mean, extremely, you know, controlled fishing regulations there, because that's an important industry in tourism in Alaska. Here's where we had lunch. There's a fish. There I am. There is a moose. I started seeing some real Alaskan wildlife on that day. I think that might have been on the raft. This is back at the Museum of the North. I didn't see enough of it the first time, so I had to go back. And they have these kayaks and these different things in here. There's some art. There's the official mascot, kind of like the Nittany lion. They have their University of Alaska Fairbanks polar bear. And then next it was on to Denali Park. I finished up my stay in Fairbanks, so I noticed this wooden bear, and I remembered back in the 90s they were very common. Everywhere you would see wooden bears. So I wanted to get a picture of him, and just some beautiful scenery kind of coming down. Where Fairbanks is it's north of the Alaska Range, so they have a lot of rolling hills that are kind of similar to the Appalachians. Although I did get as far north as to be able to see the Brooks Range earlier, but I didn't get into it. But yeah, this is heading down. This is crossing, I think it's the Tanana River in the town of Tanana, Alaska, maybe 50 miles north of Denali Park. And this is the Tanana River closer to Denali Park. This is the river where I went on a raft trip back in 1999 with my dad and the guide, and we did like 26 miles in 4 hours, and it was class 5 rapids, and just really, wow. They weren't doing that at this time of the year. Everything was getting ready to shut down. The buses had already stopped for the year. Everything was on sale at these trading posts, so I ended up getting like 10 Alaska shirts and stuff, like really cheap. Not all in one place, but like it was like all of Alaska was selling all kind of stuff because tourist season's about to end. So this guy right here in the orange is Denny Riggs. He is the National Park Service geologist for Denali National Park, and as far as I understand, there's only 16 of them in the country, I guess, that, you know, for very particular national parks that have a lot of geological issues or that are especially large. And so he gave us the tour on the bus after the buses were closed for everyone else, and the bus driver just drove the bus. Usually the bus driver gives you the tour and the whole thing, but we're all geologists, so we got special stuff. So we went on this old bus, and the first thing I saw when we got out, we were looking for an old fault, was this rabbit. I think it might be a snowshoe hare or something. I'm not completely sure. So here we are. We're just, he had us like do this little like exercise where we went through the woods, and like he pointed to some things and like what do you think you see here? And he showed us there was a fault scarp very near the Parks Highway, which is the main highway from Anchorage to it goes all the way to Fairbanks, and Denali Park's kind of in the middle. So here's some construction activity. From what I understand, all the construction equipment in Alaska has to be very specially made to withstand Arctic conditions, and it has to be warmed and everything, because normally the oil and what they use would gel up at like 10 degrees, and they can't work, you know, here in the winter, but they can there because they have special equipment. So here's a braided river, the Toklat River, going into Denali Park, and this is about 12 miles in. I went up, I saw this mountain and I thought, you know, there's hiking trails here, but we didn't have time, so I said, I'm gonna go climb this mountain. Later I found out it was Mount Marcy, so I didn't do it then, but I did it the next day. Here, this is where the visitors cannot go any further, like only, if you have like a special permit or you're on the bus, you can go past that point. Savage River campground, I believe. So here are just go through some pictures. We saw this guy coming across the road. He's a coyote. So then here is a grizzly bear, a big burly grizzly bear. I have like 30 pictures of him, and I even had a video of him. I mean, just amazingly good view of him. And then you can see the road. This road is very narrow, no guardrails. This is thousands of feet like down, and like there's a cliff right here, and that's the road that goes 90 miles into Denali Park. And that's one of the reasons why they have a park geologist, is so that he can help the engineers mitigate the hazards from the earthquakes, which trigger landslides, and also determine their usage and how many permits and whatnot they want to have on that road per year, because the more usage that you have, the more it could cause problems. So there's our geologist. Here we go. There I am. So this is a hotel I stayed at. It's called like the Denali, Alaska, Denali Hotel or something. It was $150 and it was half price, and it was this kind of place. Like, I thought it would be like so fancy, but like everything is just so expensive there. Then there's another moose. And then this is another day, another field trip. We got a field trip of a coal mine, which is a coal mine that supplies the entire state of Alaska, which has 7 coal-fired power plants. And this coal mine has enough known reserves of coal to power all of Alaska for 250 years. We weren't allowed to take pictures in the coal mine, but the coal mine had this spectacular outcrop, like a 50-foot seam of coal. And it was subbituminous coal, which is the coal they have in West Virginia. So what we did get pictures of is the power plant next to the coal mine, which wasn't all that interesting, but yeah, just a few pictures of this huge power plant. I think this is the Tanana plant here, and yeah, there's just 7 of those throughout the state, and there's a stack from it. So the next day, of course, yeah, I had time to go back to Denali and explore a little further and hike that trail that I wanted to hike. So I'm already hiking up it here. But yeah, this is kind of where I started. That's the road. This is where the visitors need to have special permits or go with a guide to get past that. I see a paw print. I don't know what that might be. It could be a coyote maybe. And there I am. And this like little hike, it was up Mount Marcy, and it was like from 3,000 feet to 4,600 feet. But I was questioning whether I could do it. Like the conditions got crazy. Like there was like a foot of snow and stuff, and someone was like, you know, there's some ravens, but they said, you gotta go to that rock and you'll come down on the other side. And I'm looking at that like, oh, that's like really extreme mountaineering. It looks so far away, I didn't think I'd ever get to it. But I did get to that rock, and there was all this spin drift and all this white, you know, snow just blowing everywhere. And these were the kind of mountains that you could see. I mean, I felt like I climbed Denali, like climbing this little peak. It was just amazing. So here's, yeah, some of the snow. Coming down the other side, completely different conditions, just, you know, no snow at all at the bottom here. Nice creek, some mountains. So yeah, now we're done with that. So the next day, this would be the 7th day, I believe. I was there 9 days, so I was in Anchorage for a few days, and I regret I wasted one of the days going to technical sessions at the conference and not doing a field trip. And I did a field trip the other day, and someone said to me, well, what are you going to remember? Like, are you going to remember the technical sessions of the field trip? I'm like, oh my gosh, the field trips, it's so obvious. So this is the room in the hotel I got, Anchorage Hilton. They actually had 2 rooms, and this is one of the rooms. I mean, and it overlooks the ocean. It was like $134 a night. Like, it was the best deal on my whole trip. Just amazing room. And then here I am just walking through downtown Anchorage. Once again, they have a lot of bear-themed things in the store here. I got some more stuff for 30% off or whatever the going rate was. This here picture was kind of really weird. It's like deja vu. Like when I was little, I had dreams about like volcanoes and everything, and it like was this picture. So that's Anchorage. Yeah, bear right there. Some Anchorage. Alaska Railroad is headquartered in Anchorage, and that's an interesting organization. It's partially a state-run and partially a private enterprise, so it's a cooperative thing, but that's the only railroad that runs in Alaska, and it's important to supply a lot of places that you can't get to by road. This is in the evening. I tried to take a tripod long exposure of the city. The sunsets are just amazing from up on top of the Hilton. It's the highest building in the city. This is looking out over one of these arms. There's like a Nick and a Turnagain arm, like these 2 inlets to the ocean that kind of go around Anchorage, and so there they are. And then I tried to fool around and take some nighttime pictures of like vehicles coming through. But the next day, so this is the second to last day, we went down to halfway to Seward, and we got a private tour of what did they do? They opened up the tourist center for us that was normally closed to the public, and they let us in, gave us a private tour. So that's coming up. Here we are, just on the way. There we are. Yeah. So it's the Chuga National Forest Information Center. So we went in there. This guy here, he gave us the tour, let us look around, closed the doors after we went in so nobody else could get in because they're closed for the season. And they had a movie screen right here. And so you go in there, you watch the movie screen, it's the first thing you do. And then they lift the movie screen and this is what you see. And so about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this was all glaciers out here. And he was like, yeah, it was like right there, and now the glaciers are up here. So they've receded so much in like so little time, it's amazing. So I went outside then and I took a picture of the glacier just way up in that valley. There's more glaciers. I really started seeing a lot of glaciers in Anchorage and south of Anchorage. When I was in Fairbanks, I was north of the glaciers. So there's their visitor center. There's a close up on the glacier. And then we went next to a place a little nearby where they have this tunnel, and it's the longest tunnel in North America. It's 2.6 miles. It goes through a mountain and it takes you to Whittier, Alaska. In 1999, when I went with my dad, it was only trains that could go there. So the only way to get to Whittier was by train or a float plane or boat, and you couldn't drive there. Well, apparently the year after I went, they made it into a two-way tunnel like nothing they have anywhere, and you can go through with the train and vehicles and alternating on the half-an-hour schedule. So they shut down the tunnel for half an hour so that we could go in. They took us in the control center here with the guy from the DOT. So here's the tunnel. This interesting A-frame shape was designed to help split off avalanches and deflect them, because this is a tremendously avalanche-prone area. Everyone that works in this tunnel or has anything to do with it is a trained firefighter, so they showed us their firefighting equipment. This is me inside the 2.6 mile tunnel, kind of toward the Whittier end of the tunnel. And in the tunnel, there's every so often they have like a bug out room, and it's a completely self-sustained like room with its own air supply that in the event of emergency